Coming up on Network Africa, Sudan declares UN envoy Volker Perthes as unwelcome in the country. Senegal bans protests by Ousmane Sonko supporters as Amnesty International urges independent probe into deaths. Plus, prosecutors in South Africa increased the number of charges brought against Rwandan genocide suspect Fulgence Kayishema. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joke Rogers here in Lagos. The Sudanese government has declared the UN envoy to the country, Volker Perthes, to be persona non grata, meaning Sudan no longer recognizes his position in the country. In a statement released by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the government notified the Secretary General of the United Nations that it has declared Mr. Volker Perthes persona non grata as of June the 8th. The head of the Sudanese Armed Forces and Sudan's de facto leader, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, recently accused Mr. Perthes of stoking the country's conflict, demanded that he be replaced. Mr. Perthes was in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia on Thursday for a series of diplomatic talks. Before the start of the conflict between the army and its paramilitary rival, the Rapid Support Forces, the UN mission in Sudan had been targeted by protests denouncing alleged foreign interference. Let's get more on this. We now speak with VOA Africa correspondent in Nairobi, Kenya, Mohammed Yusuf. Hello, Mohammed.
Hello there.
So let's begin with the UN envoy that has been declared persona non grata. General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan is accusing him of stoking the country's conflict. What evidence does the government have to back this claim?
Sudanese National Army, led by the General Al-Burhan, is yet to give any evidence of what he's complaining about, other than accusation. But this sort of accusations is a normal accusation that has been taking place, particularly where you have conflicts. Some governments or officials, government representatives feel certain group of people within the United Nations, African Union, some ambassadors taking sides, particularly when there's a conflict. That may not be the case, but sometimes even governments or people who represent governments have complained about the wordings, the statements, and this can be a similar pattern because what is going on in Sudan is a war between two forces, the paramilitary RSF and the Sudanese National Army. So in part, the UN has been clear calling for a ceasefire, for an end to the conflict, and both parties to allow humanitarian aid to go in and provide safety for the citizens or the population that are trapped in the conflict. So some of these things might not go well with some officials within the government, not necessarily the Sudanese Army, but also the RSF. So it's not something normal, but it's something normal that has happened. And this comes also at a time when the UN envoy Perthes is meeting AU representative in Addis Ababa, East Africa Regional Bloc, IGAD representatives and officials in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. So it's clear sending a message: we don't want this envoy in the country. But as we have seen in other conflicts, in other situations where there's that kind of statement and by a UN envoy or official is banned, UN has never had issues particularly agreeing to that, even though they may disagree what the government says, but they won't mind recalling the envoy and sending a new envoy, because in reality what is happening is a conflict, and the UN will like to appear as a neutral in this conflict.
Another aspect of this conflict, it looks like at least, part of the mystery of whether they've been getting arms has been solved with the news of that fire we reported yesterday. What do you make from the fact that both groups have been fighting for the arms depot?
After 8 weeks of fighting, this week RSF attacked a military depot where there are weapons and heavy military weapons, but they were repulsed by the Sudanese National Army. After 8 weeks of fighting, it shows that now RSF, after occupying several streets and people's homes, they sort of spread themselves across the capital and many parts of the country, and they may be running out of ammunition because the Sudanese National Army has been heavily relying on air air bombardment to push back the RSF. But RSF has spread itself, and in part it shows that now the conflict enters a very difficult moment. If those kind of weapons want to get into hands of people, like for example in this case RSF, and there again these arms people cannot know where they're going, because we know there are many terrorist organizations, many militias in that country, and that may go into the wrong hands. It creates more problem for the region, more insecurity with the region. And that is now a delicate situation now, even though both parties want weapons. But if these weapons go beyond that, gets into the wrong hand, then it's going to create more problem, not necessarily for RSF, but also for the Sudanese army and entire the country.
There have been other types of casualties apart from people dying in this conflict, such as General al-Burhan replacing some of his governors. Can you hazard a guess as to why those governors were fired, one from an area where there hasn't been no fighting at all?
One of the governors, of course, comes from the west of the country, where there have been conflicts since the war began in April. But there is another governor that he banned, of course, comes from the southeast, and that is Senegal state. What we do understand is there have been some tribal chiefs who have complained about the governor himself, whether the government led by the other side, the government led by Burhan, was responding to the demands of the tribal chief, calling for the replacement of the governor. But there have been also instances where there have been sort of militias attacking people, where some tribal chief was saying there's sort of an abyss going on, conflict, violations of human rights that is taking place. But also, if we recall back in 2021, that state is one of the 5 states where the government imposed curfew because of deadly protests that have been going on in that state. Whether Burhan was responding to the tribal chief demands or something else, or maybe he feared maybe that governor may lean towards the RSF, maybe time will tell. But as it is, what we know is there have been demand by some tribal chief to replace the governor.
Some of those greatly affected by these 8 weeks of violence are children. It's good news that orphans have been rescued from one of the orphanages in the country. Could there be children elsewhere in similar situations just waiting for help?
Entirely, of course, there are citizens in many parts of the country that are trapped in this conflict, not only children. But it's a good news that an orphanage where many people may not have access, or maybe they were neglected, and a time where many people are trying to run away. And it's a war also now creates more orphans, because many people are losing their lives, and many people are fleeing, leaving their lives behind. It is a good news that those children were rescued, but of course there are many children across the country that need help. And in part, people have been talking about access to humanitarian need, and some of those children, in part of report, they're saying that they were left without food, without water, without medicine. And this is sort of replicated in many areas where such kind of people have fled and they're left alone. But it is what it is now, but there's a call for humanitarian access, and that is something that we'll see if tomorrow or in the weeks to come, both parties will agree to.
Right, Mohammed, thank you for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
Well, violence has erupted among 2 displaced communities housed in the UN Protection of Civilians site in the Upper Nile state's capital, Malakal, South Sudan. The violence is said to have been triggered by a stabbing incident, with initial reports citing 3 civilians being killed and injuries to some 20 others as of Thursday afternoon. US peacekeepers have been deployed to cool tensions, which had been simmering since the end of last week, when a dispute at a water point quickly escalated into full-fledged conflict in which a 32-year-old man was killed. Additionally, medical peacekeepers in UN hospital facilities are providing emergency care for some of the wounded. The mission has called for an immediate cessation of hostilities and is working collaboratively with state authorities to restore calm. And 4 Tunisian soldiers on military duty have died after their helicopter crashed into the sea in the country's northwest. President Kais Saied has offered condolences to the bereaved families, saying the accident cost the lives of 4 army men. He adds that there's a need to renew military equipment. The president also admitted that the deterioration of some equipment in Tunisia had led and continues to lead to such tragedies. In 2021, 3 soldiers were killed in an army helicopter crash in the southern Gabes province. The findings of the investigations into that incident are yet to be released. Rights group Amnesty International has called on Senegalese authorities to carry out independent investigations into the deadly violence during protests last week, saying at least 23 people died. This death toll by Amnesty is higher than the official number of 16 announced by the government. According to the rights group, 3 children are among those killed. They are now calling on the authorities to carry out an impartial investigation into the circumstances and to ensure that those responsible are prosecuted according to fair trial standards. Senegal's government says it has launched an inquiry into the protest deaths, but it's yet to respond to Amnesty's statement.
Senegal is taking stock of the damage done after the jail sentencing of prominent opposition figure Ousmane Sonko. The jailing of Sonko led to 3 days of protests which saw infrastructure damaged and public transport torched. The partly state-funded bus company Demdik was a common target during the protests, with more than 70 buses torched and around 20 smashed with rocks. Ousmane Silla is a chief executive of Demdik. He says the riot cost the company a lot of money.
In the protest of the past week, we have seen an upsurge of major significance and losses. We estimate the buses that were stoned, looted, and burned amount to the equivalent of more than $5.75 million in losses for Dakar.
Silla said it would take around 15 consecutive days of calm for the company to bounce back fully. Stalled operations can cost Demdik up to $80,000 in losses per day and make it difficult for thousands of commuters to get to work. Ndiaye Cissé buys goods in Senegal's capital, Dakar.
If these buses are destroyed, we will feel it. This is a means of transportation that is at our doorstep and allows us to move around without difficulty. It is harder for us, the workers. When you burn what belongs to everyone, it's not the state that will feel it, but your fellow citizens.
The government estimates the unrest could slow economic output by an equivalent of around $33 million per day. More than a dozen were killed and hundreds injured when security forces clashed with protesters. Sonko's supporters saw his conviction as a political attempt to stop him from running for president next year, but the government denies this. Sonko was first detained for alleged rape 2 years ago, which led to the start of an ongoing legal battle.
And an autopsy report in Senegal shows that a student who died in the capital Dakar on June the 2nd during clashes between security forces and protesters was killed by a live round in his back. 26-year-old El Hadji Cissé is said to have been shot yards from his home in a suburb of Dakar in the evening as he returned from praying at a nearby mosque. Hundreds attended his funeral in Dakar's Grand Yoff neighborhood on Monday and later at a cemetery by the ocean where Cissé was laid to rest, covered in a shroud. The autopsy report, which have not been previously reported, said Cissé was shot in the back and that the bullet punctured his right lung before exiting from his upper arm. It's not clear who killed Cissé. However, his brother and friends say security forces shot at protesters and that Cissé was caught up in the middle of the violence. Still to come on the program. Mozambican ruby stone, said to be the world's largest, sets a new record, selling at almost $35 million. Details in a moment. Please stay with us. Welcome back to the program. Let's get you more on the political violence in Senegal. And as we reported earlier, of the autopsy report in Senegal, which shows a student who died in the capital of Dakar on the 2nd of June during clashes between security forces and protesters, was killed by a live round. So many other issues surrounding that. We're joined on the program today by Mohamed Sako, who is a business owner in Saly, Senegal, and he joins us now for more discussions on the political unrest in the country. Hello, Mohamed.
Good afternoon.
So what's the atmosphere like in Senegal now? Is the political unrest seeping into the life on the streets? Are businesses being greatly affected by this?
It is indeed seeping into life in the street. The situation is a bit convoluted and mixed up, because you have to understand that on one side, people are waiting for the president, Macky Sall, to really make a statement about yes or not he's gonna run for the next elections. That's one thing. The other thing is after Ousmane Sonko was condemned after being acquitted of the rape charges that was against him, a lot of people think it's political and judicial harassment against him. And also on the third hand, you have the Senegalese people who are actually the only one legitimate to really choose their next leader to be able to continue and have Senegal as a heaven of peace in Africa.
This is said to be the worst unrest the country has seen in decades. You've been in Senegal for years. As an insider, how would you describe this unrest?
Yeah, it was really violent aggression. Businesses were shut down. It's the first time really that we saw such a violent riots with a lot of economic incident and consequences.
And tell us a bit more about, the man in the center of it all, Ousmane Sonko, and why he seems to be such a threat to the establishment, yet he's so liked in many quarters.
Yes, you have to understand that Ousmane Sonko is a young leader who's not yet 50 years old, and who was loved by the Senegalese youth because of what he calls the project. And the project to him is to really make sure every Senegalese youth, African youth, are proud to be African. They don't need to go to Europe using boats or different things, but they can make it here just for the love of their country. And that's why I think he is loved by this many youth in Senegal.
Right, just one more question before I let you go. It seems that, with his seeming threat to the establishment, because he's liked in so many quarters, people, I think they want to continue this protest. How much longer do you think this protest will be carried on?
Actually, I think that the president of Senegal, Mr. Macky Sall, as the commander, should really appease the situation, talk to the people, and if he does that, I'm sure everything will really come back to normal.
Right, thank you for your thoughts on that, Mohamed, and please do stay safe.
You're welcome. Thank you. Thank you.
Elsewhere, South African prosecutors have significantly increased the number of charges they are bringing against former Rwandan police officer Fulgence Kishama, who is wanted internationally for participating in the 1994 Rwandan genocide. He is now facing 54 separate charges relating to fraud and immigration in South Africa, up from 5 previously. Kishama, who is one of Rwanda's most wanted remaining genocide suspects, is accused of ordering the death of 2,000 people hiding in a church. South Africa's National Prosecuting Authority alleges that Mr. Kayishima used a false identity in order to apply for asylum and refugee status in South Africa. The case has been postponed to June 20 for Mr. Kayishima's defense team to consult, at which point he could apply for bail. He also expected to face extradition to Rwanda to be tried for crimes there, but those proceedings have not yet started.
There were more charges that were added. We'll remember the last time there were 5 charges, and now we've got 54 charges. That 54 includes 9 counts of fraud, 10 counts of the contravention of the Refugees Act, and 35 counts of the contravention of the Immigration Act.
In Guinea-Bissau, the opposition coalition has won the legislative elections. The leader of the opposition celebrated the win after the Paitera-Ranka coalition, led by his party, won the majority of seats in parliament. The parliament of President Umaru Sissoco Embalo took 29 seats. Following the announcement by the electoral authorities, President Embalo announced that he is ready to appoint Domingos Simoes Pereira, the PAIGC president and leader of the Paitera-Ranka coalition, as prime minister. President of Angola, João Lourenço, has sacked the minister responsible for economic and social development following protests triggered by the government's decision to end fuel subsidies. He has replaced Manuel Nunes Jr. with the central bank governor, José de Lima Massano. The withdrawal of the subsidies, which Mr. Nunes Jr. said was aimed at cutting government spending, came into effect on the 1st of June, leading into a steep rise in fuel prices. The oil-rich nation has since experienced a wave of protests, with more expected over the weekend. On Monday, 5 people died and 8 were injured after police opened fire on a group of protesters in the city of Huambo. Angola is one of the largest oil exporters in sub-Saharan Africa. Well, some beaches in Egypt's Red Sea resort of Hurghada is vacant of beachgoers a day after a Russian citizen was killed in a shark attack and after local authorities issued a ban on swimming, snorkeling and other water sports. Egypt's Environment Ministry revealed that a tiger shark was responsible for the death of a beachgoer without giving details of the victim. However, a team from the ministry and other authorities was able to capture the shark. A diver who arrived on the scene just after the attack said people had rushed to help the victim after a lifeguard from a nearby hotel raised the alarm but were not able to reach him in time. And as we end the program, a Mozambican rare ruby said to be the biggest ruby ever to come to auction has been sold in New York for a record sum of just under $35 million. The stone, a whopping 55.22 carats, was discovered last year in a mine in Mozambique. Uncut, it was 101 carats. It has been called the Estrela de Fura, meaning Star of Fura in Portuguese. The name refers to the company that mines the stone. Polished rubies of more than 5 carats are extremely rare. Sotheby's, who auctioned the gem, described it as a once-in-a-lifetime jewel. The same auction also saw a record sum achieved for a pink diamond, the 10.5 carat gem from Botswana, described as a fancy purplish pink stone, sold for just under $35 million.
Is called Estrela de Fura, which means Star of Fura in Portuguese, and it was originally found last year in July. And when it was first discovered, it was a 101 carat rough gemstone, which already excited so many people in the gem industry. And when it was faceted and afterwards, made into this beautiful cushion-shaped gemstone, it is one of the biggest and largest gem quality ruby that we have ever seen. The color and the saturation, the clarity together with, everything that comes together with the ruby, it's just a very, very fantastic and beautiful piece. It is from Mozambique, which is also one of the new and more popular originations that we see for rubies, apart from the more traditional and the classic Burmese pieces that we see. And we've really also been excited to see how the Mozambique pieces have been very well received in auction.
What a gem indeed. Well, that's the show today. Thank you for watching. I'm Jokia Rogers.